Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Wednesday, November 15th, 2023, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well, my buddy. It's happy to be back. So much for not drinking on a Wednesday, but happy to be here. So let's light this candle.
Cheers, my friend. I'm joining you. I got a glass of wine in my hand right here. We are also joined by fellow contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
What's up, guys? Paige, what do you mean? Every day's the 4th of July, brother. Wednesday, Tuesday, every day depends on why. Come on, dude.
Except if you live in Cleveland.
Well, I'll tell you what. Cleveland right now, dude, the weather here is like 60 degrees for Cleveland. It's unbelievable, man. For November, like mid-November.
Yeah.
But, everything's good here except for, the entire city shut down today, like was on suicide watch because of Deshaun, being out for the year.
Deshaun Watson season-ending injury. Oh, my God. The franchise is a snake-bitten, forever snake-bitten. So we are not here to talk about the Cleveland Browns, but we are here to talk about a whole bunch of other things, actually. And among them will be number 2 Ohio State's final home game of the 2023 season against unranked Minnesota this coming Saturday in the Horseshoe. Fellas, I'd also like to spend a few minutes looking back at last Saturday's 38-3 win over Michigan State. And then, of course, we need to devote a little time to Michigan's 24-15 win over Penn State. And then, of course, maybe we can talk about Michigan a little more broadly and peek ahead, of course, to November 25th. I mean, there's really only so much meat on the Minnesota bone that we can pick at, let's be honest. And all we're really thinking about, right, let's admit it to ourselves, is that Ohio State-Michigan game on the 25th of November.
I can't believe PJ Fleck is still there.
He's doing a solid job there. I think he's got Minnesota performing at its ceiling for what that program is. So you were thinking, CP, that he
more to bring to the table.
Oh, okay. So guys, let's start with last Saturday's 38-3 win over Michigan State. Our listeners have not yet had an opportunity to get your takes on that game. So PBH, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you give me a few thoughts on that performance by the Buckeyes last Saturday?
They just, they did what they needed to do. They came out quick, right? Did anybody get hurt? No. Honestly, that game and this game are, just the appetizers for the feast that is coming on the 25th. They did what they needed to do. And honestly, like, I had a bunch of people over and I was running around all day in Vegas the week before. I would look up and, Ohio State just scored another touchdown, which was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And like, so wasn't grinding on every play like we were for Rutgers, which was good to see, right? Like, kind of like the juggernaut Ohio State that, we can, not have to, like I said, grind on every single play.
Yeah.
I love the unis.
They were awesome.
Dude, and the atmosphere, and again, it's just like the atmosphere, at night, and like, I shake my head again, and I'm going to I don't care. I've said it 1,000 times. Like,
here we go.
These fucking games at 9 a.m, dude, nobody is, like, who likes that, right? I mean, the players feed off it, the crowd feeds off it. I mean, they're still going to draw huge TV ratings. Thank God this game's at 2. Like, there should never be another Ohio State game that kicks off at the Shoe in Columbus before noon ever again. Ever.
Okay.
It's all about the money, bro.
Yeah, but dude, the money's are going to be there no matter what they do, right? It's not like,
I know, but like, you've got like multiple networks competing, and like, if like you got the big Fox Noon, whatever.
Yeah, that's their brand. That's their window.
Money.
Yeah,
I get that, but that game is going to draw the same number at 8 o'clock. The game will draw the same number at midnight. So,
well, that's probably
why
true.
does it have to be?
I get it, dude. I get it, but I don't think they have the ability just to throw on a game at midnight.
Yeah,
we'd watch it. That's for damn sure. I'd watch any time of the day.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. CP, how about you? What about last week's performance against Michigan State stood out to you?
I tell you what, I think the game is slowing down for McCord.
Yes.
He's like his ability to, just kind of adapt and kind of he's seen the everything just a little bit like slower. It's like everything's coming a little bit easier to him. So
Yes.
and that is such a good like warm and fuzzy feeling to like as we're going into next week. I love seeing it.
Absolutely.
That was the one thing that kind of like stood out in front of me. And you know what? The kid can throw some dimes, man.
Yes, he can.
I'm not looking ahead to next year. I want this year, and I feel like we're gravitating towards that right now. But like I tell you what, man, give us the national championship. I would love that, but the kid next year, dude. I mean, wow. I mean, he's got potential. Like, I mean, he's solid.
Absolutely.
I love McCord, man.
Yeah, 24 of 31 for 335 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. The 335 was a career high for McCord. What else you got, CP? What else?
And I love Trey, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I like that he got his work in early. 13 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown, and then they got him the hell out of the game. He did not play in the second half. I thought that was exactly as we drew it up in our pregame pod, right, CP? It was an eye test performance for the Buckeyes, right? We knew what Michigan State was. They weren't going to pose any real threat to the Buckeyes, and the goal was just to look the part of a title contender, make quick work of an inferior opponent, have your key starters on the bench by the middle of the third quarter, and get out of there without any more injuries, though mostly mission accomplished, but
Right.
On the injury front, it sounds like Mike Hall Jr. was nicked up in that game. He left early in the first quarter. I don't think the telecast picked up on that. It was the Ohio State beat that mentioned it after the game. He's got some kind of undisclosed injury. He didn't return to the game, and it looks like his status might be in doubt for Minnesota. So let's hope he can play and be a factor against Michigan. So fingers crossed there. PVH, I'm going to kick this back to you. Any other thoughts from that performance last Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, the McCord thing is interesting. I mean, I think 10 games in, you would expect to see that, right? I mean, obviously the kid's got talent, and, it takes some time. And so that's, let's just, I don't want to get over my skis because, right, it's Michigan State and that's a dumpster fire. But
Right.
I agree with Chad on the point, right? Like if the game is truly slowing down for him, and the offense is starting to click, that's a very scary proposition for the rest of college football. So let's just hope it continues and it carries over the next 2 weeks for sure.
8 touchdown passes for Kyle McCord in his last 3 games. CP, what else you got on this game? Any other thoughts you want to share?
That's all good, man. You know what? The one thing that kind of stands out to me, and I'm sure it's been a huge focus, is Hensman. I mean, like
The center, yeah.
like I
Carson
gotta
Hintzman.
get those right. I gotta get him in sync. Like, that's a critical position. I mean, you get like some, I think the offensive line is coming together, but that your center has to be on the same page.
Yeah, he's struggling this year. Carson Hintzman's overall PFF grade on the season is 53.1. Not great. His pass blocking grade is 39.2. A little better in run blocking, 57.7. It is interesting, and I didn't realize this until after the game, and I was listening to the Ohio State beat, Bill Landis and Leigh Maurice and that crew, that they actually made a change at center and put Matthew Jones in for 10 snaps late in that game with the first-team offense. Now, it was not a necessity. Ohio State was comfortably ahead, but it was interesting that they gave Matthew Jones, with the rest of the starting offensive line, snaps at center in this game. And one wonders, will they consider making a change at some point over these next 2 games? Because Jones actually was recruited to play center. He played it in high school. They know he can play there, and then you move another player like Tegra Shabola, somebody like that, in a guard. So that's a good point about Hintzman. He's really struggled this year. And, man, I'm sure they're loath to make a change at that position this late in the season. But you're going to go up against a Michigan defense. The strength of that defense is in the interior. They have 3 really good defensive tackles, so they have to be sound there in the interior. Guys, anything else we want to talk about related to the Michigan State performance before we have a look at Minnesota?
I mean, I would say, can you really then objectively say that the offensive line is playing better if you're thinking about swapping out your center at game 10, knowing that we've had offensive line problems all year long?
Yeah.
That's a gigantic effing red flag, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the offensive line has performed well as a unit in spite of Hintzman. Well, the concerns were tackle mostly, right? And we think that the tackles have acquitted themselves over 10 games pretty well. But no, I agree with you. Yeah, it is a red flag. I mean, you do not want to make a change at this stage of the season with your starting five.
If you're actually going to do it, I don't think, 10 days before you play Michigan, number one, ranked defense in the country, whatever that's worth, and interior run stoppers or whatever that means, that's a positive sign for the Buckeyes. I would call me crazy.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he's having some anxiety issues, Paige. I mean, come on.
Maybe you should ship him some gummies. Can we get a delivery to Hintzman?
Yeah, that'll. I'm sure that'll help on game day.
Yeah.
All right, fellas, why don't we have a look at this Saturday's matchup between number 2 undefeated Ohio State and unranked Minnesota in the Horseshoe. It's senior day, but they might as well call it senior/draft eligible junior day because a whole bunch of seniors and draft eligible juniors will be playing their last games in the Horseshoe on Saturday, to be sure. It's interesting, not counting reserves who barely play and, the practice squad types. Xavier Johnson, Josh Proctor, Matthew Jones, and Tristan Gebbia, they're the only 4 players who actually have exhausted their eligibility. And then you have seniors Kate Stover, Tommy Eichenberg, Steele Chambers, Julian Fleming, Lathan Ransom, who, by the way, Ryan Day said is out for the rest of the regular season. Cody Simon, G. Scott, Jahad Carter, Victor Cutler, Enoch Vamahi, and Jaden McKenzie, they're all seniors, but they all have still another year of eligibility from the COVID season. And then you have the draft-eligible juniors, Marvin Harrison Jr., who we know is gone. This is his last game in the shoe. Emeka Egbuka, Trey Henderson, Donovan Jackson, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, Mike Hall Jr., Tyleek Williams, and Jordan Hancock, many of whom we think will be playing their last game in the Horseshoe. So a lot of players we think are going to be playing their final games in the Horseshoe on Saturday. The game is a 4 p.m. Eastern kick on the Big Ten Network. The line is Ohio State minus 27.5. The over-under is 48.5. Ohio State leads the all-time series between these two schools 47-7, and that includes a 45-31 Ohio State win over the Gophers in the 2021 season opener in Minneapolis. That's the last time these two schools played. Minnesota head coach P.J. Fleck leads the Gophers into this game at 5-5. They're losers of their last 2. They lost a heartbreaker at home to Illinois 27-26 on November 4th, and then they got spanked last week by lowly Purdue 49-30 in West Lafayette. The Gophers were also smacked around by Michigan 52-10 back in October, but then they went on the road in their next game and they knocked off Iowa in Kinnick 12-10. So, guys, I thought we would kind of do our usual thing. Let's look at offense and defense. We'll look at each side of the ball. Before I dive into that, any overarching thoughts on this game? PVH, I'll start with you.
12-10? Was that like a squash game?
12-10. And by the way, did you guys just see, before we jumped on, Cooper DeJean, their stud do-it-all corner, done for the year. Looks like he got hurt in practice. Sounds like it could be an Achilles or an ACL. For Iowa. For Iowa, yeah. 12-10. That was a absolute snooze fest. But they won the game at Iowa. Minnesota did.
How many people watched that on the TV broadcast? 37 or 39?
Yeah, I can't imagine that was one of the more watched games.
Highly watched, college football games. No, I'm good.
Okay, and CP, how about you? Any overarching thoughts before we dive into offense and defense on this game?
I think we should just not even play this game. And, just have a all bye week.
Can we skip it?
It's actually a good week. Yeah, we do have to.
Well, I mean, what the SEC does is the SEC schedules an FCS opponent this weekend, which is basically a bye, right? It is interesting, though, because, you mentioned about getting dialed in, not being distracted, not looking ahead, that sort of thing. Now, Ohio State has been known to struggle in games the week before Michigan. I mean, we need to look no further than last season. at Maryland right before Michigan. We struggled in that game. The 2018 Maryland game, that went to what? Double overtime. Ohio State wins by 1 point. Back in 2016, Ohio State struggled with Michigan State, only winning 17-16 the week before Michigan. Now, all those games were on the road, but even back in 2014, look, Ohio State's last national championship season, the Buckeyes took a 1-point lead into the fourth quarter against Indiana in the Horseshoe, and we all painfully remember the inexplicable 17-14 home loss to Michigan State the week before Michigan in 2015. Though that, of course, was a very good Michigan State team that went on to win the Big Ten and make the playoff. But my point is, listen, it isn't always a Mona Lisa, this game for Ohio State. Over the last 15 seasons, the only games Ohio State won comfortably the week before Michigan were the 56-7 laugher over Michigan State 2 years ago, a 52-14 blowout over Illinois in 2017, and a 42-14 win over Indiana in 2013. Now, all those games were played in the Horseshoe against overmatched opponents, and I think that's what this game against the Gophers qualifies as. So hopefully that's what we see out of the Buckeyes. But as we're thinking about our score predictions, the look-ahead variable, I think, is something to factor in. So, fellas, let's start by having a look at the Minnesota offense. It is not a thing of beauty. The Gophers come into this game ranked 114th nationally in total offense. They're 118th in offensive yards per play. They're 102nd in scoring offense. They're 125th nationally in passing offense. Now, they're a little more capable running the ball. The Gophers are 63rd in rushing offense, averaging 160 yards per game. However, they're 95th in rushing yards per attempt at only 4 yards per attempt. So Minnesota averages about 40 rushing attempts per game, so they want to force the issue running the ball. And I don't think they really care how much success they have running. But, guys, this might be the worst offense the Buckeyes have faced this season, perhaps even worse than Michigan State last week. The Gophers are led by sophomore quarterback Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who is completing only about 52% of his passes through 10 games. He has 13 touchdown passes, 7 picks, and he's been sacked 17 times. They had a really good running back named Darius Taylor. He's a freshman who was playing really well for them, but he got injured back on October 21st against Iowa. He has not played since. Jordan Newman will be the bell cow for Minnesota more than likely in this game. He's averaging 4.9 yards per carry, only has 2 rushing touchdowns. Finally, at receiver, senior Daniel Jackson, pretty solid player. He comes into this game with 681 receiving yards on 45 receptions. He has 7 touchdown catches. That's not bad. And he leads the Gophers in all 3 of those stats. So, PVH, I'm going to kick this over to you. Give me a few thoughts about the Ohio State defense against this very limited Gopher offense.
Oh, you switched it up. We're going our defense against their offense. As you were spouting off those statistics, I wrote down what I thought the score would be, and I wrote 40-2. Like, how could they possibly score? Other than a safety, and I mean that's not going to be my prediction, because then I wrote 40-4, and that would be like, well, could I get there without 2 safeties? But that's not going to happen either. Wow, I mean, so again, like, I've not watched one single play of Minnesota all year long. I don't know how
you're not missing anything.
Hey.
But how can you be in the Big? I know I say this all the time.
Right.
I'm a broken record, but how can you be in the Big Ten and be ranked in the hundreds, like literally across the board offensively?
It's terrible.
145.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't know. So, good luck, I guess, Minnesota. I'm not that really worried, and maybe I should be. The look ahead factor.
Right.
But I mean, obviously the defense is playing great, solid. I don't expect anything other than what we've seen for the last 10 games, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just going to roll with the trend.
Yep. Makes sense.
Be dominant. You got to do something, right, competently, I think, to beat Ohio State in general, but, from an offensive to defensive perspective. And it doesn't clearly sound like they have anything.
No.
Like, you can't, like, they don't even have a good tight end, right? Like, their best player's a tight end. Like, just, okay, we'll lock him down and we'll probably be all right. It doesn't even sound like they have that. So, just don't get hurt. Stay healthy. That's my biggest thing.
Amen.
Good
Amen.
point, yeah.
Yeah. How about you, CP?
but come out the gates first quarter solid, no mistakes, no penalties, and then let's get our let's get those other blue chippers, the young guys in there, take care of business.
What?
Pop-up duty.
So I did think of something, right? So with Ransom out, right, and you're way better at this, Zach, than I am. So who's sliding in?
Sonny Styles. Sonny Styles moves into the Bandit. You've got Josh Proctor, who we think will be coming back from concussion protocol, back at the deep safety spot at the adjuster. And then Jordan Hancock will play the cover safety. And I think, look, hey, man, with those three players, that's a pretty goddamn good trio of safeties right there.
They're all
yeah. I mean, would I prefer to have Ransom? Yes, of course. But man, that trio there, I mean, that would be the envy of about 125 other FBS programs, I would think.
Yeah. And 100%. And that's and where I was going with that. If you need to get some guys to get some playing time, Matthews or whomever, and
Malik Hartman, Malik Hartford. Malik Hartford.
Exactly. Yep. Right. Do it now, right? And clearly they will, and obviously they're going to be forced to. But get those guys reps, because we're probably going to need them next week.
Yeah.
So it's a bummer about Ransom for sure. Obviously we have the horses to fill in, but that's a blow.
It's a bummer. He was having an all Big Ten season.
It is a blow, dude.
It is one position, though, where I think Ohio State can afford this type of injury. I think in the secondary, they have done a good job of recruiting well, hitting the transfer portal, and developing young players both at safety and at corner.
That's very true.
Would I prefer to have Ransom? Absolutely. But if there was one season-ending injury that I think we could afford to have, it would be in that secondary. So for me, with the Ohio State defense, look, play to your standard, Ohio State. Look the part of a playoff contender against this overmatched opponent and smother this very limited Gopher offense. It's no secret what they want to do. And from that standpoint, this actually isn't a bad tune-up for the Michigan offense, which I think is going to be very deliberate about running the ball on Ohio State. So there's that. Paige, you've already mentioned it. CP, you've touched on it. An opportunity for young players to get reps, which I think is very important for next season and beyond. And also an opportunity, I think, for the defense to fine-tune some things. I'm hoping to see both Tommy Eichenberg and Josh Proctor back for the Buckeyes on Saturday. And I'll be looking for the defense to get control of this game early. No funny business. Right? No cheap scores. That's what I loved about last week. No cheap scores given up to Michigan State, whereas last year we saw that against overmatched opponents. And to your point, CP, let's get the starters to the bench by the middle of the third quarter. I'll be very disappointed if that doesn't happen.
Hey, I got a question for you, though, Z. I'll be honest with you. I really wasn't up to didn't have the 4-1-1 on Eichenberg last week. Where is he? Is he good? Is he
practiced today. He did, yeah. So he practiced today. He's wearing a brace, I believe, on his left elbow. But he did practice today. Josh Proctor practiced today. So good news on those fronts. But
good.
I guess they said Mike Hall Jr. was not seen at practice today, the Ohio State beat. So,
Yeah.
Hopefully this is just a 1 week thing with Mike Hall Jr. It's been kind of frustrating with him. He's another player who just hadn't been able to stay healthy these last couple of years. All right, guys, let's flip it around and have a look at the Minnesota defense against the Ohio State offense. Now, the Gophers come into this game 54th nationally in total defense, but they're all the way down at 98th in defensive yards per play, allowing just under 6 yards per play. A lot of folks think defensive yards per play is a better metric than total defense. The Gophers are 68th in pass defense, which is about average, and they're 48th nationally in rush defense, which is actually pretty respectable, but Purdue just ran for 353 yards on Minnesota last Saturday, so I don't know how good actually their run defense is. And their 62nd Minnesota is nationally in scoring offense, allowing 26 points per game. So, look, not very good. But a couple names to watch on that Gopher defense. Safety Tyler Nubin is their highest graded defender according to PFF with a grade of 90.6. That's actually a pretty good grade. Nubin leads the Gophers in interceptions with 4, and he's their second leading tackler. Now, their best pass rusher is Ja Joyner, who leads the Gophers with 28 pressures. Joyner also has their highest PFF grade for pass rush at 90.2, so good. He's a threat there off the edge. He's also second on the team in sacks with 4.5. Finally, they have a pretty good linebacker who has, I think, maybe the best name in the Big Ten. Maverick Baranowski, great name, who leads the Gophers in tackles with 52. So, okay, PVH, I'm going to kick this back to you. Give me a few thoughts about the Ohio State offense against the Gopher defense.
Well, I think you got to figure out what you're going to figure out on the offensive line this week, right? And again, to me, that's kind of crazy if that's the case. But if you're going to make that move, then I would make it out of the get-go, right? Because
you would start Matthew Jones at center.
Yeah, starter. Yeah. Because hopefully the game goes the way we want it to go, and then you're going to pull these guys in the second half. So if that to me is probably the biggest thing, other than, well, it is. And then the other thing is, for Igbukah and Stover, like if you're still quite not there, then I don't think I want to see you, right?
Yeah.
Like, just to be healthy, for the 25th. And then, the other one, and you'd mentioned it and I forgot about it on the Sunday sort of recap pod. Like, Xavier Johnson is a hell of a weapon for this offense.
Yes, he is.
With, like, some of those jet sweeps and,
Absolutely.
So like, like maybe ride him, in this game. And
yep.
Kyle, just keep doing your thing, get better, more game time experience. But, the overall, right, have a fast start, finish drives, right, get ahead early, and, and then get the hell out of the game, right, and don't get hurt. That's it.
I'm with you on all counts.
Yep.
All counts. How about you, CP? Give me a few thoughts about the Ohio State offense against the Gopher defense.
I concur with pretty much like everything he said. You know what I mean? Like, I'd like to see come out McCord like being have a nice rhythm.
Yep.
Complete some few first downs. Trey have a few good runs. And just get it through first quarter and a half. Biggest thing Paige said, no injuries, and let's build off of that. I mean, really, what more could you say? I mean, come on, you gave all the stats on the Gophers defense earlier, but yeah, let's get out, look good, look sharp, look like we belong, like we're going to be we are a title contender, and get the fuck out and start prepping Sunday for Michigan.
I'm going to echo all those sentiments from both of you guys. I do want to see if Kyle McCord can string together a few quality performances. I want to see, a repeat of what he did against the Spartans last week. I mean, he was decisive. He was efficient. He was as accurate as I think I've ever seen him. He was in total command of that offense last Saturday. Let me see another performance like that in this game. I want Kyle McCord playing at peak confidence heading into Ann Arbor on November 25th. Also, I do want to see some good early work from Emeka Igbukah in this game. And I wonder if the coaching staff will be intentional about getting him some touches early to help him get his timing and his rhythm back. Igbukah is the last piece that needs to fall into place for this offense, I think. Get him into a lather early, then get him the hell on the bench by the third quarter. Same with Trey Henderson, by the way. But I do think it's important for Igbukah to get that timing and rhythm back. Okay, boys, let's fire up the Concernometer. PVH, give me a Concernometer readout for this game.
1. I'm just at a 1. I'd written down 0, but I'm at a 1. I don't feel like they're going to have the look ahead.
Yeah.
And partially that's because it feels like we haven't played that many home games this year.
Yeah.
And I guess
we played more on the road than we have up to this point. 6 road games to 5 home games. This will be our 6th game in the shoe on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the 2 p.m. start, or 4 p.m. start there.
Yep.
Which I think is a perfect start time.
Love that time.
Absolutely. Me
perfect. Too. It's juiced. I think they're going to handle business. They're going to take care early, a fast start against an overmatched opponent, and so yeah,
you're a 1.
Concernometer is just a 1.
CP.
I'm going to ride with Paige. I'll go with a 1.
A 1. Okay.
I want to be pompous and go like it is like
A negative
one.
integer.
Yeah, I just ride one. I've completely changed my whole demeanor from years in past. One, all good. We'll leave it at that.
Great. I'm a 2, which is low level of concern. This team's on a mission. And I know PJ Fleck's teams have played Ohio State pretty tough in the past, but I don't think Fleck has the horses this year. Like, he doesn't have a Mo Ibrahim to keep this game close. And you do have to account for a little bit of a look-ahead factor with Michigan looming next Saturday, but this is a veteran team, and I think they'll be able to manage that. Okay, fellas, let's get to our score predictions. PVH, going to kick this to you. Again, the line is Ohio State minus 27.5. The over-under is 48.5. It doesn't appear weather's going to be a factor. CP, you mentioned the weather in Cleveland at the top here. The forecast is calling for sun with highs in the low 50s. Wind and rain will not be a factor according to the forecast. So PVH, give me a score prediction for this game.
Oh, I'm gonna roll with 40-6.
40-6.
Yeah, and I think it could be worse, but I just don't think we'll probably see Lincoln Kienholz in the second quarter or the second half. So we're not going to get the full Buckeye four-quarter arsenal. So I don't see. The defense they're dominant, right? This isn't going to be the game where something breaks down, in my opinion. So I don't know how they score. I think we score. I think it'll be very, very similar to last week.
Okay, CP, how about you?
I'm going to go 47-3.
47-3. Okay. It's so funny, man. I have Ohio State.
I'm going to give him a field goal.
I have Ohio State 41-6, PVH. I wrote that prediction down like 3 hours ago.
Wow.
41-6.
Minds think alike, buddy.
41-6, and then onward and upward to a winner-take-all top 3 matchup with Michigan in Ann Arbor. Woo, man, for the third year in a row.
Woo!
So before I let you guys go, I want to get your thoughts on Michigan's 24-15 win over Penn State last week. PVH, I'm going to kick this to you. What did you see from that Michigan win over Penn State last week that stood out to you?
So I actually watched the whole bloody thing.
Me too.
Is like my eyes were bleeding by the end.
Awesome.
The irony or they kind of beat Penn State the same way they beat us last year. Well, I shouldn't say that. Penn State, they beat them on offense the same way they beat us last year, right? Where, God damn it, come hell or high water, they're going to bring in 17 offensive linemen and just run the ball down your throat. And you cannot lose contain, right? You just cannot do it. And those guys, twice it happened, or once with Corum and once with Edwards, where they
got
bounce
over-aggressive.
it out and there's nobody home. And I just didn't understand why Penn State was doing that. And, they obviously, are not very good on offense. But it was, Michigan, I'm hesitant to say that they're one-dimensional because McCarthy can make, plays with his legs. But if you can shut them down and then make them do that to beat you, then, that's the formula, I think, to win. But Penn State didn't do that, right? And, then they were busting those long runs in the second half. And Penn State was in that game the whole freaking time. They just didn't have the horses offensively, and then I think they were just way too aggressive on defense to win that game.
I agree with you.
Franklin's the top.
Well, I agree with you about the comparison to last year. Ohio State was over-aggressive last year. Now, it was mostly in the pass game that we got burnt, but toward the end of that game, right, it was they were selling out to stop the run, and there was nobody at the second level to stop Donovan Edwards, and that's what reminded me in this game. It reminded me of what happened last year in Columbus because Penn State made some similar mistakes. And in fact, that last touchdown by Blake Corum, they sent a run blitz and just smashed into the offensive line, and Corum runs for an easy long touchdown. So yeah, from that standpoint, I totally agree. Their over-aggressiveness on defense, you have to be disciplined against Michigan. You do have to respect their skill players. Otherwise, they're going to beat you. Look, I said this on the post-game pod, give Michigan credit for a solid road win, but I thought that game was more about the complete ineptitude of James Franklin and the now fired Mike Yurcich to field a competent offense in that game. And as we've already mentioned, the lack of discipline from Manny Diaz's defense, which proved fatal for Penn State in this game. Michigan didn't beat themselves, and they took advantage of every single Penn State mistake, whether it was a coaching or player execution mistake. And that rings familiar for me to what happened last year in Columbus between Ohio State and Michigan, because I really thought that's how Michigan won the game. Well, other than the fact that they had all of our fucking signs and they knew every play that was going to be where it was going before the ball was snapped. But we made a lot of mistakes in that game too, a lot of penalties, and Michigan took advantage of that. So if I'm a Michigan fan, though, to your point, CP, you just mentioned this, right? How Michigan just completely shut down the passing game from about the 6-minute mark of the second quarter for the rest of the game. I'm not sure I'm celebrating the fact that J.J. McCarthy finished the day with only 8 pass attempts, and he was pressured on 7 of those 8 pass attempts.
Yeah.
Right? That's being celebrated as some great accomplishment by Michigan fans, but to me, that's a sign they either don't trust their offensive line in pass protection, or they don't trust J.J. McCarthy, or both. I mean, I understand the Penn State pass rush is good, but for fuck's sake, your offensive line won the last 2 Joe Moore awards, and you're telling me you don't trust them in pass protection to the extent that you don't attempt to pass in the second half of that game? I mean, what the fuck? Wouldn't you think? I mean, the other thing that's worth mentioning is the week before when Michigan played Purdue, the Purdue defense had 22 pressures and 3 sacks at J.J. McCarthy. So it seems like there could be something in pass protection that the Ohio State defense might be able to exploit on November 25th. PBH, any other observations from that game you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have to do something, right? It's like, I mean, Jim Harbaugh's cut out of the Woody Hayes cloth, right? If you pass the ball, only one good thing could potentially happen. And if you don't have to pass it,
right,
then why do it? And if they can't stop it, keep doing it. And the other thing is that it also speaks to just the complete, fantasy world that they do live in, right? Which, goes back to the cheating thing as well. Like, everyone else is living in reality. And you guys, tout this as some great accomplishment. So I'm torn on that sort of subject, whether or not that was, something to be celebrated or not, because if you don't have to pass it, then just don't pass it. I mean, make them stop it.
Yeah, but against a competent team with an offense that's a threat, you can get away with that against a hapless offense like Penn State.
Okay,
I don't know you can get away with that against Ohio State or a Georgia or
no.
Right?
Well, true, but one thing you can't say is that Penn State doesn't field a competent defense, and they were able to still do that.
That's true.
And that's their identity. That's what they want to do. I mean, literally. I mean, it's like I didn't know a team could have that many offensive linemen, and they would just trot out 9 of them. And so they do it. It's effective.
I'll say this: if the Ohio State pass rush is as effective as Penn State, to the point where Michigan has to completely shut down the passing game, I'll take that. Give me that all day long. That is a formula for an Ohio State win and probably an Ohio State blowout.
Concur.
Yeah. CP, any kind of overarching thoughts you want to share about kind of the Michigan-Penn State game? I know you didn't watch, but anything in the post game that you heard that you think is worth mentioning?
Post game, that's exactly where I was going to go with this. Like, I did see that, and I saw that live, and I was like, literally, like, I was saying to Cougar, I'm like, is this fucking real? Did Harbaugh die like this morning? Like, this guy's fucking crying. Like, I mean,
so you're talking about the Sharon Moore interview in the post game where he was crying and dropping F-bombs. Yeah, that was.
Oh my God, we did this for you, and then I was like, I can't.
Embarrassing.
I'm watching this right now. This is insane.
Embarrassing. PVH, what was your reaction to the post game interview with Sharon Moore and this whole Michigan against everybody bullshit? What'd you think?
Not the same as everybody, but I mean the delusion that they live on is is next level. I'm just more interested in how high this actually goes, because I just can't believe that they're all I just don't think it actually stops at Harbaugh, right? I think it's, I think the AD probably knew about it. I think the fucking president must have had some, because you cannot be, you cannot be, the whole world is looking at this in one lens, and you have a different one. And I'm just so hopeful that they do have the goods. And I'm not saying I want the hammer to come down before the 25th, but it's so bizarre to me on so many levels that I'm actually like legitimately confused. But I keep coming back to that.
Right.
They all fucking must have known about it. The other thing, and I didn't see it when it happened, but apparently like McCarthy was like doing like goggle eyes on his, like pretending to steal signs like during the game, which is comical at some level.
Yeah.
But
but it's also like fucking like, yeah.
It's and the last thing I'll say about it is it's embarrassing, right? Like,
I agree.
And you and I talked about this, and I'm sure this is where you're going to go with this, Zach, so I won't steal your thunder. But like, guys, I mean, at this point, you really better have not done any of it, and I don't see how that's plausible. But I'm not saying the NCAA would give them the death penalty or something, but this is a stain that will be on this program probably in perpetuity. Obviously it will be. And so I guess you're just pushing all in. The whole fucking place is pushing everything.
They're leaning into it, yeah. Leaning into this gaslight, this institutional. Yeah, they're leaning into this institutional gaslighting job that everybody seems to be in on. Former Michigan players in the media, everybody at the administrative level, on down to coaches and players. I'm very surprised to see Michigan taking this approach. All right, boys, I want to end on this. Back to the action on the field. I want each of us to give our listeners one thought on next week's colossal matchup with number 3 Michigan in the Big House. I'm going to get us started, and then PBH, I'm going to kick this to you. What do these 5 players have in common? You guys don't have to answer. This is a rhetorical exercise. What do these 5 players have in common? Trey Henderson, Sonny Styles, Josh Proctor, Jordan Hancock, Davis Igbinosun. I'll answer the question. They either did not play, played sparingly, or were not on the roster the last time Ohio State played Michigan. And they're all playing extremely well this season. These are the PFF grades of those players. Trey Henderson, 87.7. Sonny Styles, 78. Josh Proctor, 79.4. Jordan Hancock, 71.5. Davis Igbinosun, a good solid 69. Last year, Sonny Styles only played 2 defensive snaps against Michigan and special teams. Proctor and Hancock only played special teams. Trey Henderson, as we know, was injured, did not play. Davis Igbinosun was at Ole Miss. In my humble opinion, these 5 players hold the key to victory for the Buckeyes against Michigan on November 25th. I will expand on that thought in our preview pod next Thursday. PBH, give us your one thought on this game.
That's funny, because the guy that I think is the most important player on defense for Ohio State next week is Jack Sawyer.
Interesting. Okay. Do you want to expand on that, or are you going to save it for next week?
Dude, just don't lose contain. Just don't. He's the key.
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened with Penn State. He cannot lose contain.
He's balling out.
Just what's that? Bell, do your job, Jack. Right? Yeah. And don't let them bounce it outside, and we'll be fine. Everybody, the whole defense, do your job. But I think it's not that I expect Jack Sawyer to, turn into Chase Young next week. But don't lose outside contain, and we'll beat that team.
To your point, Paige, on the season, by the way, Jack Sawyer on the season, has the 3rd highest PFF grade, 84.3 of the defense. That's his season grade, and his grade for rush defense, 82.2. Sawyer has been very disciplined, really good at playing a role in rush defense. Good point.
So the other thing I'll say, and then I'll kick it over to you, CP. I'm done. I'm not so sure I don't have Michigan thinking about the look ahead factor And Zach, you and I were on the phone the whole time last year watching them play Illinois. Illinois should have won that game.
Yes, they should
last year.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would be much more concerned, or I have a much higher propensity for Michigan to have the look-ahead game than us. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, real quick before I kick it over to UCP, they are at Maryland, where we were last year. The game is Michigan's a 19-point favorite in that game. Over under is 55.5. All right, CP, give us your one thought.
My one thought is McCord. McCord is the key to this game, and that's the one thing that I will leave it at that. I love your thought, Zach. I like that.
All right.
Yeah, that's a huge point.
Yeah.
Think about that. There's a lot of all those players you named. That's huge.
Yeah, huge. And I look forward to expanding on that in next week's preview pod. Okay, fellas, listen, why don't we end things there? Thanks so much for making the time for our listeners. I will be back with you on Sunday morning with my usual game recap. Then look for a preview of the Michigan game from the three of us next Thursday. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.